Joining us now for our program is Tony Gosling, historian and an investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol, and Robert Fantina, author and journalist, joining us from Kitchener, Ontario. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess, Tony, we'll start with you. Your initial thoughts on this looming ground invasion, and tell me, when you're Tel Aviv, in the face of growing calls not to go through with this Rafah attack, how do you justify it if you're the Israelis? How do you justify attacking a densely populated area with over 1 million refugees there, 600,000 of them children, knowing at the end of the day what the cost is going to be there for that civilian population?
Well, the Israeli government has been failing to ask itself that very important question for nearly 80 years now. This is really the culmination of many decades of abuse of the Palestinian people. Now we're seeing starvation. It was interesting, isn't it, hearing from Tedros at the World Health Organization, knowing also about the UN aid organization, UNRWA. The United Nations, surely now the penny has dropped, that there needs to be some kind of armed intervention to stand up to the Israelis. Now, obviously, this is not going to come from just, for example, one particular state in the, maybe a neighbouring state in the Middle East, but this is the United Nations needs to get down to business. So, where are China? China is supposed to be a major force in the UN. Why aren't they trying at least to get through resolutions for armed intervention to protect these civilians? Where are the calls, for example, a no drone zone to stop many of the killings and all of the surveillance of the Palestinian people in this totally inhuman way? And these war aims, we need to have the UN Security Council challenging them again and again. The idea that the Israelis are going to destroy Hamas is absurd. We're supposed to consider this as a war aim, but of course they cannot destroy Hamas because Hamas has got massive support, and they're getting more and more support the more Israel tries to kill them. They're also trying to release the hostages, they say, but of course that's not actually happening at all. Those hostages are being killed by the Israelis. So this move on Rafah, it has got to be, I believe, we need to see some action at the United Nations. Otherwise, the institution may as well almost go home. If they're not prepared to back up their own institutions, at least with attempts to get resolutions at the Security Council in order to stand up to these Israeli, well, they're not just bullies, they are genocidalists, then one wonders what the UN is doing. I mean, is Tedros picking up the phone to the UN Security Council and saying we need some action? Because we can't have the international community being attacked. This is no longer just the Palestinians or the Syrians or the Iranians being bullied and kicked around by the Israeli Defense Force. This is the world community now, and so we need to have some sort of a response.
Thank you, Tony. Robert Fantina, welcome to the program. To Tony's point, Robert, your initial thoughts on this looming Rafah attack. It's already begun, maybe not on the scale that we're about to witness in a few days coming up. But the World Health Organization, to Tony's point, is pleading with Tel Aviv not to close the border crossings, as you're already, your bloodthirst is going to drive you not to listen to anyone on this planet and attack Rafah. At least let them eat, let the children have medication, let the wounded be treated at area hospitals, give them the fuel and medicine they need to deal with the onslaught that you're about to unleash upon them. Your initial thoughts, please.
Well, unfortunately, the Israeli government doesn't see the Palestinians as human. They don't see them as people deserving of rights, of food, of water, of medication. They just see them as in the way, something less than human that are disposable, and right now they're disposing of them. The Israelis have often said that Israel was land without people for people without land, excuse me, ignoring the fact that nearly 1 million people were living there, 750,000 driven out in 1948. But they don't see them as people, they don't see them as humans, and they don't care about the fact that they have now closed off the one route to that was bringing humanitarian aid to Rafah and all of the Gaza Strip. They don't care that people are going to be starving to death. They're going to die horrific deaths in bombs, from the bombs and the soldiers that are going to invade. They don't care about any of this. They want to clear them out of Gaza and of all of Palestine, so that Israel can then annex Gaza as it wants to annex the West Bank, and it does not want to recognize the existence of Palestinians. The fact that even the U.S. president has now said he's going to withhold some weaponry from Israel just shows how serious this is, and how the fact that Israel is willing to ignore everyone on the world stage shows what a rogue nation it is, has no regard for international law, human rights, and what we're about to see is a horrific acceleration of this awful genocide.
Thanks, Robert. And Tony, how does the Israeli regime not see how there's levels to this thing? How does it not see that this level of brutality that we've seen for the last 7 or 8 months, to your point, last 80 years, but that we're probably going to witness to a much more disheartening level in the days to come, how it reflects back upon the regime itself? Tony, how the world has expressed through all the protests, through world leaders, through so many voices in different congresses and parliaments and whatnot, in their opposition to this campaign against civilians, in particular. How, I mean, when it's all said and done, I mean, the world has expressed, Tony, basically to the regime that they do not share the same disdain, the same bigotry and level of discrimination against the Palestinians that Tel Aviv does.
Well, look, George Orwell, the English writer, I think everybody should literally go and get hold of a copy of his book 1984. He was a BBC journalist, like I used to be many years ago, but he was working for the BBC World Service. And what he said, his letter of resignation is still there on the BBC's website, in fact. And he said the propaganda doesn't work. But in his 1984, that was a propaganda he was doing at the time in India for the British government. But at the end of the day, the point here is we're asked to do something which he wrote about in 1984. And he was from Eton, by the way, the elite school in Britain, but he was very much for the people. And he talked about something called doublethink. And doublethink is exactly what the Western propaganda, TV services, and the Israelis are putting out at the moment. That is to say, this contradictory fact. So the idea of destroying Hamas, the idea of releasing the hostages whilst killing them. This is exactly what Orwell was talking about. And so the idea really, I think, from the Israeli point of view, is to totally befuddle and bemuse everybody, but to sit and wring their hands as they see the West trot out the same nonsense. And this is why many people, I think, are becoming so angry. Others are becoming disengaged with the news. But the only way to deal with this, I'm afraid, is to literally to stand up to it with physical force of some kind. And I'm talking here about potential ways of actually destroying the walls around Gaza in order to let aid in by other routes. Now, if the Israelis are going to occupy Rafah, let's see some holes in those walls. I mean, we've had tunnels in the past, but we need to get trucks in there. And so there needs to be some real, I think, action in order to challenge the Israeli military domination of the area. Obviously, Hamas are doing that on a small scale with small arms and a few bombs to blow up some of the tanks occasionally, apparently. But we need to see some I think, much more concerted efforts in a humanitarian way, to ensure that the basic supplies for human life get in. Otherwise, these people are now at the point of starvation. And this is the sort of thing that we cannot allow any supposedly democratic or civilized country to get away with. The whole world community needs to pull together to stop right now, because Rafah was the end of the line. Rafah is the last place that people have been able to get to, and now the Israelis are bombing that, and they're also stopping aid getting in. So we need action right now to save many of these people who are now being literally starved to death as we speak.
Right, it is that dire, Tony. To your point, it's like you're in a boxing match. You're boxing someone that you have 30 pounds on. They're 30 pounds lighter than you, and by closing these border crossings, it's like you're also drugging them. You're 30 pounds heavier than them, and you're drugging them before the fight. It's just really an unrelenting and despicable way to get into a conflict. Final question I'm going to put to you, Robert. The women and children of Rafah desperately need protection and security under international law right now. Where is it when they need it? Riyad Mansour, the Palestine ambassador to the United Nations, says that immediate action needs to be taken, that the Security Council is duty-bound to protect these women and children of Rafah. What's the point of international law if it cannot come to their aid right now, Robert?
Yes, international law demands that they are protected. They are entitled to that protection under various international laws. The Security Council will not act because the United States has veto power and will veto any action that would protect the innocent people in Rafah and throughout the Gaza Strip. The Security Council needs to be reorganized to get rid of the veto power because time and again the United States has thwarted the will of the leading countries of the world, the most powerful countries of the world, to prevent genocide, to prevent the horrific things that have happened for decades. But now we are seeing in 2024 genocide happening in real time, and the United Nations is unable to stop it because of one country, and that's the United States. The Security Council is powerless because the United States has veto power. It's a tragedy for the people of Gaza. It's an unspeakable tragedy that history will judge the United States, the United Nations, very harshly because of this.
Oh, history is going to look back on this. I mean, it's just unreal. I want to thank you both for joining us in the program. Stay safe to both of you. That was Tony Gosling there, historian and investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol, and Robert Fantina, author and journalist, joining us out of Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And viewers, this brings us to the conclusion of this segment of your Press TV News Review program. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye for now.